Minute 30 to broadcast on Shaw. Minute to Shaw broadcast. Thirty seconds to Shaw. We are live on Shaw.
I would like to begin by welcoming everybody to our meeting this evening. Thanking all of our broadcasting partners and media partners for broadcasting and reporting on our meetings. I want to recognize and acknowledge with respect that we are in the Robinson Huron Treaty Territory, and the land on which we are gathered and meeting is traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, known historically as Bawating. Bawating is the home of Garden River First Nation, Batchewana First Nation, historic Sault Ste. Marie Métis Council, and the head office of Missinabbi Cree First Nation. So I want to recognize the really great work the Indigenous Friendship Center does in Sault Ste. Marie and our urban Indigenous population. Before I move on into the meeting, I want to recognize and also thank Team Jacobs for their really tremendous week this week. They really worked hard for that Olympic berth and came very close, and as they always do, represented our community well. So I want to recognize them for their efforts and thank them for it. And I should also take a minute to just communicate to the community that the new restrictions that Algoma Public Health put in place are effective today. It's important to note that our prevalence of COVID in our community is currently higher than the prevalence in the province of Ontario when we came out of our last lockdown. So much less significant numbers led to a lockdown. And we came out of a lockdown at lower numbers than we are currently at now. So we are seeing significant numbers in our community. It takes a while for our collective action to result in a decrease in case count. So I want to just encourage everybody to keep committed, stay committed to Algoma Public Health's recommendations and Algoma Public Health's restrictions. And if we all reduce our individual context, our collective cases will fall. I want to encourage everybody to keep on working together for your own health and safety and the health and safety of your family and friends, but also importantly of our community at large. Madam Clerk, if you can please start the meeting.
The motion by Councillors Dufour and Scott resolved that the minutes of regular council meeting of November 15, 2021 be approved.
All in favor? Motion is carried.
I have not received any declarations of pecuniary interest.
Any to declare at council? Councillors? Seeing none?
Under agenda item 4, I have a motion by Councillors Vezo, Allen, and Verde resolved that the agenda for November 29, 2021 City Council meeting as presented be approved.
All in favor? Carried.
And under agenda item 5.1 is a proclamation Community Christmas for Children.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I have the proclamation here. Whereas children are important members of our community and the holiday season is a particularly special time of year for them. Whereas Community Christmas for Children, consisting of local businesses, agencies, and organizations, plan no-cost activities for children and their families during the month of December and the school winter break. Whereas the goal of the initiative is bringing the community together to support families and brighten the holidays for children. Now, therefore, I, Christian Provenzano, as Mayor of the City of Sault Ste. Marie, do hereby proclaim December 1st, 2021 through January 2nd, 2022 as Community Christmas for Children in Sault Ste. Marie, and urge all citizens to take advantage of the many activities available for children and their families. Thank you.
Under agenda item 5.2, a proclamation for World AIDS Day.
Whereas it has been 40 years since the first AIDS cases were reported, and HIV still threatens the world with more than 60,000 people living with it in Canada. Whereas local health responses continue to work toward the elimination of systemic barriers, stigma, and social inequalities, with HIV Awareness Week, Indigenous AIDS Awareness Week, and World AIDS Day providing opportunities to further efforts to address the challenges impeding treatment and prevention. Whereas the theme for World AIDS Day 2021 is End Inequality and AIDS and Pandemics, highlighting the urgent need to combat the inequalities that drive AIDS. Now, therefore, I, Christian Provenzano, as Mayor of the Sault Ste. Marie, do hereby proclaim December 1st, 2021 as World AIDS Day in Sault Ste. Marie, and encourage all citizens to learn more about the initiatives to local organizations that are committed to increasing awareness and support people living with AIDS, HIV, including the upcoming HIV Awareness Week and Aboriginal AIDS Awareness Week. Thank you.
Under agenda item 5.3, homelessness update, Mike Nadeau, the Chief Executive Officer with the District of Sault Ste. Marie Social Services Administration Board, and Jeff Barbin, the Director of Housing Services with the DSAB, are in attendance.
Welcome to Council, Mr. Nadeau and Mr. Barbin. Mr. Nadeau, are you doing the presentation?
Yes, I'll be leading it.
Thank you.
Am I able to share screen, Madison or Rachel?
Yes.
You are. Madison will help you with that.
Are you able to see the presentation?
We are, Mike.
Okay. Well, first off, Mr. Mayor and members of council, thank you very much for having us here this afternoon and this evening. There has been no greater pressure put on our organization aside from the homelessness file over the last few months or approximately a year. So we're really appreciate the opportunity just to come and update council on some of the work that we've been doing over the last few years, and then hopefully we'll have some questions at the end. So if it's okay, Mr. Mayor, I'll just start the presentation.
Absolutely, Mike, the floor is yours.
Okay. So I thought I'd start with a bit of a background. And I apologize for the slideshow karaoke in advance. However, I do think that I need to go through it verbatim. Social housing in Ontario is managed by 47 service managers as determined by the province. Northern Ontario is comprised of 11 service managers. There are 10 DSABs, District Social Services Administration Boards, and there's also the City of Greater Sudbury that is a service manager. Each DSAB is responsible for the service delivery over multiple municipalities or townships over thousands of square kilometers. So the 10 DSABs have a large geographic area. The City of Sudbury is only responsible for the city itself. All federal, provincial, and municipal funding related to social housing is provided to the applicable service manager or DSAB. The Sault Ste. Marie DSAB supports or funds the following in the community. We fund 15 social housing providers. We are responsible to make sure that we have oversight over 2,221 social housing units. 26 new units were put in line on this year alone. We are responsible for homelessness and homelessness prevention services and for food security. I just wanted to demonstrate that our 2020 budget to 2021 and 22, for housing services alone, in 2020 it was $16.6 million, and this year our forecasted draft budget was $17.2 million. However, we do think it will be above that by the time some other provincial and federal grants come into play this calendar year alone. Of that $17.2 million for this year, $11.4 million is directly levied and paid for by the City of Sault Ste. Marie and in the Prince Township. So the vast majority of our housing division, which is one of 4 divisions for the DSAB, is funded through significant levy draw by the city. Homelessness and prevention. Service managers or DSAVs are also responsible for homelessness and are mandated to have a 10-year housing and homelessness plan as set out by the province. Our plan includes the use of shelters, outreach workers, and a housing stability bank. Shelters offer a temporary bed and a safe place to stay for our homeless population. Outreach workers assist people staying in the shelters, people who are sleeping rough in the community, or members of the community in a social housing unit that come from the chronic homeless wait list. We also have the Housing Stability Bank, and that bank provides funds, which is essentially a grant for people who are behind in their rent and or their PUC as a strategy to prevent homelessness in the first place. Our shelter system, shelters are open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and our current system consists of 20 beds at Pauline's Place, and they serve women, youth, families, and accessible people who have accessibility needs. We also have St. Vincent Place, which has 14 beds. However, that was reduced to 7 during COVID as a result of social distancing was not practical within their facilities. However, as Vincent Place reduced its capacities, we added a temporary overflow shelter to better serve the community at the former Steelton Center. We also use motels and hotels when required. If our shelter system is full, the shelters are full, we will not turn someone away who requires the bed for the night. We will put them up in a motel or a hotel if that was where which they desired. When someone enters our shelter, they are assessed using a triaged approach, and the most acute people are eligible to be placed on our chronic housing wait list, and they receive high intensity supports. It's also important to note that our DSAB was the first in Northern Ontario to develop a chronic housing waitlist category in 2015, 2016. People who are not placed on our chronic housing waitlist are assisted to find accommodation and are offered light supports. We also have a housing prevention team, and approximately 25 people from multiple community agencies work together as part of that team to serve our marginalized community members. Since 2019, we have been making some significant strategic investments in our system. We recognize that our shelter system was weak, and when we compared it to peers, it was significantly underfunded. In 2019, we secured $900,000 from the province of Ontario to implement a low-income home ownership program. And that program is intended to allow people who do not have the down payment to be able to purchase a home that's renovated through Ontario Works, and then that program gets recycled through the DSAB on an annual basis. It's been working really, really well. We also purchased the Steelton Center from the city of Sault Ste. Marie for $1 and allocated approximately $600,000 to renovate the space to operate as a shelter for Pauline's Place in 2020. We purchased the former Sacred Heart School to operate as a shelter, a transition house, transition rooms, and as a former NRC in 2020 at a cost of $500,000. We increased shelter wages to a minimum of $20 per hour in the better part of 2020 and later part of 2021. Before that, we had some shelter workers who were paid minimum wage. And when we looked at the turnover, when we were speaking to our shelter partners, it only made sense that we made sure that they provide a decent competitive wage. So we updated it to have a mandatory minimum of $20 per hour per staff member. In 2020, 2021, we also implemented the community wellness bus with our area partners, Surrey Hospital, CMHC, and Algoma Family Services. We opened the COVID isolation shelter in 2021, and that is at capacity over the last few months. And we also leased and renovated the Verde Hall to operate as a temporary low-barrier shelter, which will offer between 14 and 28 beds when it comes online. And the Verde shelter is a bridge until we get these former Sacred Heart renovated and operational, which is hopefully going to be in September of 2022. Some of our current plans include renovating 8 transition units at the Steelton Center at a cost of $355,000. Those are starting to open up. We already have 3 people who are residing there now. And the transition house are meant to be about a 30-day to a 6-month stay until people can find permanent housing. So what we're looking at trying to do is our system is someone enters a shelter, they go to transition housing, and then they go into more permanent housing over time. We are currently renovating the former Sacred Heart School to operate as a shelter, and it will have a minimum of 14 shelter beds and also a minimum of 22 transition units, and it will also include the NRC. And Dr. McLean has agreed to provide services out of the NRC. Our community partners are going to be providing service, so we're really excited to get that back up and running. The cost when we finally complete renovating Sacred Heart will be in the millions of dollars. There will be many millions of dollars that we're spending on that. I do not want to state the budget just because we will be issuing a tender, and we're trying to make sure that our costs are as low as possible. We've also purchased a new asset that will be renovated and allow us to accommodate an additional a minimum of additional 14 affordable housing units in over the next 3 months. We hope in 2022. So by 2022, we will have added 44 new affordable units into the community mix. Our homelessness related budget. As I stated, we've made some significant investments since 2019. However, COVID was also a factor, and there's been a significant increase in provincial and federal funding. In 2019, we were spending a little over $2 million on homelessness related funding. In 2020, it was 3.8 million. In 2022, it's a little over 5 million. And in 2022, our budget will be approximately $4 million is what we're going to be spending on the homelessness file. We also completed our third pit count, which was held on the week of October 25th. And our pit count is a point in time count where we go out for the week and we complete a count of all the homeless people that we can find across the community in order to accurately gauge and assess how we're doing and just how many community members need our help. This year, for the first time, we expanded the scope of our homelessness count, and we included the hidden homelessness, i.e. the couch surfing, and that provided a dramatic increase to our numbers. Last time we did a pit count, we tried to do them every 2 years. We did one in 2016, which was 74 people we found. 2018, we uncovered 93 individuals. In 2021, we had to wait 3 years because of COVID. We counted 244 people that were classified as homeless within the community. That's an increase of 151 people, which is significant, but we'll get into a little bit of the data to show why. Some of the makeup that we wanted to highlight. In 2018, 28% of the homeless population were female. In 2021, that has jumped up to 40%. So it is a significant increase in the population, and Pauline's Place is doing a marvelous job in providing service to those individuals. Another thing that we would like to highlight, in 2018, 37.5% of the individuals we counted self-identified as Indigenous. This year, that population that has self-identified, 65% of our community, of the homelessness community, has self-identified as an Indigenous person. That's really important data to understand, as the last census data that we had, 12% of the community self-identified as Indigenous. However, 65% of our homelessness population self-identifies. So we do know that we have a significant overrepresentation of the population. We also wanted to show some of our shelter nights. The shelter usage is going up dramatically. In 2020, Pauline's Place had 2,027 visits. As of the end of October, which we still had another 2 months to go, they were at 3,338 nights. And St. Vincent Place had 2,852. When we counted St. Vincent's and the overflow shelter combined for the men, we're up to 4,021 room nights for the year to date. There is a significant need for additional supportive housing in the community. Currently, right now, we have 10 units that are operated 24/7. We have an additional 13 units that provide semi-supports for 8 hours a day. There is a need for, based on the last pit count, to have, there's a need for up to 60 additional supportive housing units to be added into the community. And when we talk about supportive housing, what we're talking about is people need supports for their health. They also need supports with mental health and addictions. They may need to take medication, harm reduction services, cultural services, meals, and room cleaning. Supportive housing is something that this community has been trying to get for many, many years, and it's just starting to get more acute. Supportive housing requires 3 items at a cost of approximately $50,000 per year per room. So first, we need a new capital investment to purchase or build a new facility, a new apartment building. The DSAB can provide that. We have access to private market lending, and we can handle a capital investment of significant value. then the rents also need to be subsidized. Because people, if you're in receipt of Ontario Works, your rent is only $397. Your shelter allowance is only $397 a month. And we know that rent just on a break-even point is much more than that. But the DSEB can assist with rent subsidy. The third leg of this stool that we require to make it balance requires a new investment from Ontario and or Canada. A supportive housing complex requires approximately $3 million in annual new funding over a 20-year period, or a $60 million total investment. So it's the supports that we require in order to make this strategy work. We know that we can provide new housing. We know that we can put people in apartments. However, our experience has clearly demonstrated that without that health support and 24/7 supports to people residing independently, their tenancy will not be successful. Rooms get damaged. There will become issues with neighbors, et cetera, et cetera. And if a tenant is evicted from social housing, and for example, they may have a $30,000 damage to their room or to their apartment whenever it gets renovated, they can never get back into social housing until that debt is cleared within the province of Ontario. So really, it's setting the person up for failure if we do not have the proper supports available to the person to make sure that tenancy is successful. Mr. Mayor, that concludes my brief overview of our system, and I'm sure that there are some questions from either yourself or members of council that we'd be happy to entertain.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, I'm sure there are. I've already got kind of a list that started here. So I will get to that. Before I do, I just wanted to take a moment to thank you, Mike, and the entire team down at the DSAB, the homelessness team, and all the frontline service providers that are working with a lot of people in our community that need care. I've really appreciated the effort that you and your team have made to provide care and to work with people in very challenging circumstances throughout COVID. I think it's pretty clear that some of the challenges in our community are becoming more acute, and you and the entire team of DSAB deserve some recognition for really outstanding work and obviously making significant efforts to improve our system. And I just want to recognize and also thank the councillors who participate at the board level on the DSAB for the contributions they're making to the significant changes that you're systemically making to make sure that we can provide care for people. I'll have further comments when my colleagues are done on the need for treatment, supportive housing beds, and we can have a discussion about that. But Councillor Nero, you're first on my list here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mike, for that presentation, and thank you for the work that you and DSAB are doing and have done in the past. Mike, I have a question relating to the homeless. Is there a percentage of the homeless in your point in time count that is local or opposed to transient?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll ask Jeff Barbin to take that. Jeff would be more of the technical, be able to answer that technical question.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Nero. The majority of those that we have are local. More so during COVID, the actual transients has reduced considerably. We haven't tracked any. Typically, a transient will move through the city within a minimum a week. But what you see in our numbers now are 99% local.
Okay, thank you, Mike and Jeff. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's all I have.
Jeff, while you're there, either Jeff or Mike, can you give us a breakdown of Indigenous versus non-Indigenous, what the ratio looks like there?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I can do that. So 65% of our homeless population self-identified as Indigenous.
That's a really disproportionate percentage relative to the population at large. And I think it's something that we need to reflect on, because I think it tells a very difficult story. Councillor Christian, I thought I saw your hand up there. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I share your thoughts regarding DSAB and Mr. Nadeau. So I just want to say personally, thank you. It was a pleasure working on that board for so many years. Mike, in your presentation, you made it clear that DSAB could handle capital investment when it comes to additional housing units, but support services are something that you said, and I want to be clear on this, that it's the responsibility of the provincial or federal government, or for the most part, their responsibility in terms of financing that ongoing cost?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Christian. Yeah, traditionally the supports are in the health lens. So that's why we're stating from our perspective, typically it's not a DSAB or a municipal, like typically. Obviously we do have a responsibility to make sure that we're providing service. However, the vast majority, because it's mental health service, addiction services, et cetera, it typically comes from the health sector.
Thank you. And I'm asking that question for the sake of the public, just so that they better understand the dynamics. Mike, how much would you say in the last 3 years, City Council has added monies for the purposes of social housing in Sault Ste. Marie by way of the levy? How can you tell me how much more in the last few years we've contributed?
As a ballpark, I don't have the exact number, but I just know that in our shelter system alone, we've added approximately $600,000 annually from the levy.
Okay.
That's the shelter system alone. That does not include any new staff that we may hire for the DSAB that also work through the housing prevention team, any additional rent supplements that we're throwing to that. So just on the shelter system alone, it's approximately $600,000 annually.
Okay. One final question. Can you draw any correlation between the jump rather in the homelessness situation in the Soo? Could that be correlated at all to mental health / opioid addiction?
I would say it's correlated. I would classify it as direct contribution.
Okay.
It probably, I would just anecdotally, it would be about 98 to 99% of the homeless population would have a mental health issue or an addiction issue. It's the opioid crisis is one of the driving factors.
Yeah.
And it's not just in Sault Ste. Marie. We work with the 47 service managers across the province, and we also work in networks across the country. And most, if not all, municipalities are of any size are seeing something that's very, very similar.
Yeah, and I don't want to oversimplify the situation because it's grave and it requires thoughtful thinking. But it just the whole issue, I think, with homelessness. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's really a symptom of the bigger problem, it seems, right now, which is the opioid and mental health issue, and all the more reason we need to plead to other levels of government to assist us here. So thank you.
Yeah, the DSAB would look at this as quite honestly, I think we need an all-of-government approach. That includes the DSAB, the province, and the federal government. And I do believe that homelessness is the disease. And when we're focusing on treating the disease, we're actually not focused on preventing the disease in the first place.
Thank you. That's it for me, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Christian. Any other comments or questions from city councillors? Councillor Vezo-Allen.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Barbin. Jeff, when you did the point in time count, did you factor in age? There's been much discussion around the Social Equity Committee about kids that are getting out of care and not in the foster system anymore and not having access to adequate housing. did you do any sort of count in terms
Yes.
of age cohorts?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Vezzo. Yes, we did an age cohort. What we're looking for, as far as that particular, I don't have the presentation that breaks down the ages, but we're definitely dealing with a core of individuals between. We have a breakdown here. So this year, and what we're looking at for 2021, we had 9 youths from the age of 16 to 24. We had the majority, 82 individuals from the age 25 to 64.
Okay.
That gives you what you're looking for, but we can provide you further details if you wish.
No, I just know that that's been part of the conversation. And regarding the Housing Stability Bank, for someone to go and request assistance with either their rent arrears or their utilities, do they need to be Ontario Works recipients?
No,
Councillor Hafez-Allen, no. The way that our system is, that rent bank, is if someone needs assistance with their utilities and or their rent, they are to contact the Ontario Works office. Ontario Works staff administer the Housing Stability Bank for the community, but it is not intended for people solely. There's other tools that we have for people who are on OW or ODSP. It's kind of intended for more of the quote unquote, the working poor. Why we want to drive people to Ontario Works, often there's other benefits that we may be able to provide, because if someone's behind on their rent or their hydro bill, oftentimes there's other needs that may accompany that family or individual. So we really want to make sure that our experts, the case managers, have a conversation with folks about what are any other needs, so that it's not just, so we're actually helping versus just taking them out of a bind. So we really like to case manage as well.
And just one last question, just so people understand what it is. Can you explain what the temporary low barrier beds are at the upcoming Verde shelter, please?
Sure. When we're talking about low barrier shelter, our current system right now may have an individual who has inappropriate behavior and they're asked to leave the shelter. And right now they may be asked to leave the shelter for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, et cetera. Oftentimes it's an untreated mental health condition that may be prevalent, or they may be under the influence. So the low barrier shelter, what we're looking to do is to have people that will gain entry. And if they're under the influence, they can come in, have a safe place to sleep. If their behavior warrants that they have to leave, we'll ask them to leave for the night. But then they'd be welcome back the next day. There's not going to be a time when they would be barred from the shelter unless there is a health and safety risk to our team. That's the only thing that we can't tolerate, is a health and safety, if someone becomes violent. However, so when we're looking at low barrier, we're trying to make it so that it's easier for people to access the shelter than some of the current entry eligibility levels that exist now.
Okay, thank you so very much.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Vezzo. Councillor Bruni, you had something on 5.3? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you to Mr. Nadeau for his presentation, and thank you to his staff who have done a tremendous job in these hard times that we're accounting right now. Also, I'd like to thank the councillors that sit on the board, and obviously a special mention to Councillor Dufour, who's the chair of the board. My question goes to Mr. Nadeau regarding your currently you require more supportive housing. In your presentation, it says new capital investment, DSAB can provide, rent subsidy, DSAB can provide or assist. For the health and personal support, if you require a 60-unit supportive housing complex, where does that come from? Does that come from the municipality? Does it come from the provincial or the federal government?
Well, ideally, you always want the federal government or the province to provide, to be quite
right.
honest. However, I do think that in a crisis, if we're looking at trying to serve the community, it should be all of the above. Obviously, the federal and provincial government have deeper resources and access to deeper resources than the DSAB ever would. However, right now, I just think that we're at a critical point where we need to really figure this out, and we need to do it very quickly. But I envision an all-of-government approach to making sure that people are safe and healthy.
Now, the municipality is aware of this. Is our provincial and federal government aware of this? Of the 60 units that you're proposing to us?
Yeah, I'm just outlining an issue. I'm not making a proposal tonight, but I have had conversations with our member of provincial parliament and just briefed him on the ask, and he's been very receptive, and actually have a meeting with him coming up in December, where myself and the executive director for Ontario Aboriginal Housing Services, Justin Marchand, we're meeting with the MPP, and Justin is also trying to get a meeting with the MP as well, Terry Sheehan, to make sure that the MP is fully aware of the needs within the community. So we are working on trying to secure and get those ducks in a row. However, it does take some time, but I think that they're aware of, I've not spoken to the MP on that specific ask directly. We agreed that we would have individual conversations, Justice and I, and then have tried to get everyone together to really plan this out.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Dufour.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to thank Mike and Jeff for taking the time to come here and present what can be a very complex picture. You know, as DSAB chair, I can certainly appreciate how many different funding envelopes go into the work that we're doing, and it can make it a tricky thing to report on at times, and we've certainly seen some inaccuracies in the past. So it's very nice to see a complete and a whole picture of what the municipality is putting towards housing and homelessness being presented here tonight. And just to reiterate, Mr. Nadeau, can you tell us how much the municipal dollar levy increase for the shelters was in the last 2 years?
Just 1 second. Sorry. In 2019, we were provided $448,000 is what we were funding the shelters. In 2021, it was $1,017,000. So it's approximately a $600,000 increase, or 125%.
Wow. So over a 10, 20-year lifespan of something like a plaza, we're talking more than double the price. That's what I wanted to point out. I think that, you know, the municipality has given housing and homelessness a really significant priority over and above maybe some things that have gotten further media attention. So I'd like to thank you guys for coming tonight and helping us to get that message out there. Much appreciated.
Councilor Shoemaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Nadeau. Mike, if there's one area that the city is the most critical, I guess, area that the city is could provide further assistance with, whether it's funding or resource that you need, or anything else that you could think of, what's the most critical thing we could do for you to make the situation better?
We need to get the supportive housing line, supportive housing online. It does need to be figured out. Like I said, we've housed everyone from the homelessness protest encampment. We've housed people from coming from Seward Hospital. We had around 60 people in hotel rooms across the room. However, without that 24 support and it being purpose built, it's a really, really difficult file to manage. So people need that help in the room, not just a roof over their head.
Okay, yes, thank you.
So that was the piece I wanted to speak to. I want to thank Mike and Luke for meeting with me about this, and I want to thank Justin Marchand and the team he put together from our Indigenous community for meeting with me on this. It is critical that we develop a significant supportive housing presence in our community. And you might look at the price tag and say, well, you need to find $3 million annually to support that and think that's a big price tag. But I don't think in context that it is. And I have indicated to everybody that I've met with is that I would be supportive of the DSAB's participation in that and its contribution to that budget in a significant way to get our provincial and federal partners in line and on side, because I think our ratepayers pay that anyway. They're paying it in significant downstream expenses. And we're seeing that. We're seeing that presently in the significant money we're trying to put together to deal with an acute crisis. But we're also seeing that in something like our police service budget. Lisa will, Councillor Vezawan will tell you 80+% of our calls to the police service are social disturbance. A number of our calls relate and are caused by mental health and addiction issues. And those aren't criminal issues. Those are healthcare issues. But it's natural that police services gets called. There's significant pressure on police services. That puts significant pressure on the demand for service. That takes police officers away from investigating serious crime and rooting out things like the drug producers and the drug distributors. So I really think we need to take our focus off, or we really need to invest money into the system so that people who need care and want care can get care. People who need housing and want housing can get housing. We need to develop that infrastructure here. And I think if we develop that infrastructure here, and if there's an upfront cost to us, it's worth investing in. One, because it's important to provide people with that care. But two, is there will be, with time, downstream savings, and we will take pressure off other organizations in our community, which is creating a cost increase elsewhere. And I want to recognize I completely support doing this, and we should do this. We should put together a plan. We should put together a great project, and we should work hard as a group until we get the support we need from the province and from the federal government to make it a reality. So I'm fully on board, and I'd encourage the DSAB to continue to move forward with it, and I'll help any way that I can, because I think it is critical to our community, and I think developing these 60 beds is probably the thing that we can do to most immediately help address and deal with some of the challenges that we're all seeing. So again, Mike, I want to end by just really thanking you and your team for fantastic work. You're doing great work, all of you, and it's appreciated and it's important. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. And I'd also like to thank our housing team. The last few weeks have been extremely stressing on everyone within housing services. We've had employees that have been working around the clock, canceling vacation, working on days off, et cetera. I can't thank them enough for the contribution that they're making. They're doing it because they care, and they care deeply about the people in the community. So thank you very much for the time. And if there's any other questions, I said I think everyone has my contact information, and we'll be sure to get a response to you as soon as we can.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Jeff. Madam Clerk, I think that brings us to the consent agenda.
That does bring us to consent. I have accepted agenda item 6.3, the user fees, as there was an additional motion put forward by Councilors Shoemaker and Scott.
Understood. So we're dealing with consent with the exception of 6.3, which is separated. Councilor Christian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 6.3 has been pulled, so I only have really a couple of questions on 6.2, tender for fuel. I don't know if Ms. Marlowe is present or if CAO can handle the question. Not sure who to direct us to.
Just ask the question.
Sure. Okay. I guess the question I have, I mean, I appreciate the quality of McDougall Fuels, and I certainly always want to shop local as much as possible, but are there any other suppliers when it comes to fuel and fuel delivery in the region, area, city?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, I see Deputy CEO Girardi is able to answer that. You're on mute, Larry.
Yeah, Larry, you can just hit your mute button there, please. So there's Larry, Well, you're kind of going on and off mute, right? So you're off mute now. You show us off mute, but we still can't hear you. So it looks like Larry's having some technical problems. Mr. CEO, is there anybody else while Larry sorts that out that we can direct that question to?
Susan
I see
Hamilton Beach is on the
Susan
line.
just-
Yeah.
Susan just popped on here. Susan, do you have an answer for us?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, we have had a competitive process in other years. There has been others, but at this point in time, there was the one tender received.
Okay, yeah, and the only reason why I'm asking is I think for the process going through all of this, it's always healthy to have at least a couple of bidders. I have no doubt that McDougall will provide great service at a fair price, but I think for the sake of the process, it's good when we can have other bidders. That was my only question on 6.2, and the only issue I have.
Anybody else on 6.2? I'm not seeing anybody, so Councillor Christian, that's all you have. Councillor Gardy? Okay, so while we wait for Councillor Gardy to figure out his matter, I see Councillor Scott's hand up. So Councillor Scott, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 6.8, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
So I'm noticing there's a 6.8.1, and in regards to that updated servicing plan with costs, the very end for the recommendation. So based on what I'm reading, I just want to make sure I have this correct. The recommendation is to put the $150,000, refer it to the 2022 budget deliberations, and that would include all the work necessary to reopen, if however we get there, to reopen a campground, right? It would be serviceable.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Scott, the future of the campground will be the subject of a future meeting. The solution that's being estimated there provides potable water to the campground. It doesn't necessarily include any other costs or expenses to reopen the campground.
Okay, so then that's just one major hurdle. That's basically what I wanted to ask about that item. Quick comment on it. It's great to see that it's getting done. I think this was a necessary thing to accomplish, and I'm happy to see that Transport Canada is taking care of that. So yeah, glad we can see that taken care of. That's everything, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Gardy. Sorry, are you on 6.8, Councillor Gardy?
Indeed, yes.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Okay, full transparency, I asked Susan Hamilton Beach this question earlier today via email, and I told her I'd ask her this evening. So through you, Mr. Mayor, to Susan, since the council agenda went public, Susan, I've received a few calls about any testing that's gone on outside of the immediate area that's being addressed currently in terms of water samples. Could you speak to that for us, please?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gardy, yes, the city has been made aware that there is a residential sampling program, and that is basically the extent of the knowledge that we have. The details of that program have been worked out between Transport Canada themselves and Algoma Public Health, to whom they would be accountable to for that program.
Thank you, Susan. I appreciate that. That's it, Mr. Mayor.
Anybody else on 6.8? Councillor Scott,
I could answer. I could actually give Mr. Gardy, Councillor Gardy, a little bit of info on that from the APH board. They reached out to particular homes where they narrowed down where it would be higher risk, and they basically worked on that, and they would test the grounding in a smaller and smaller area until they kind of narrowed it down specifically to where they assumed the groundwater was most contaminated. And that was the result that I got back when the last time I asked about it. So I think they've got it narrowed down quite a bit to a certain specific area, and it looks like some important work is getting done now.
Okay, anybody else in 6.8? Seeing none, Councillor Scott, do you have anything else on consent? Councillor Gardy, did you have anything else in consent or was it just 6-8? Okay, well, anybody else have anything else in consent? Councillor Shoemaker?
I just want to thank the climate change coordinator for the report on 6.7, the electric Zambonis. I think we had our share of issues with carbon monoxide at the McMeekin, and this is, but it wasn't all, I don't think, attributable to the Zamboni, but I think that this is a good way of eliminating one potential creator of carbon monoxide in our arenas, and it's good for the health of the attendees, it's good for the environment, and let's hope it's good for our budget as well.
Thank you. Anybody else in 6-7? Any other matters on consent? Councillor Vezo Allen.
Just a comment, Mr. Mayor, on 6.5. I just wanted to thank Nancy for all of her work with the accessibility plan in the committee. And also, I think it's really important. Included in that plan is the vulnerable persons registry. And I don't know that a lot of people pay attention to it. So I think if you do know of any vulnerable people, especially our senior population, the link is there right in the report for the registry. And I think that would be an important thing to point out for people that are watching at home. As well, this is the first time we've had the municipal autism strategy as part of the multi-year plan. So really proud to see that come to fruition. And I just wanted to thank Nancy, our coordinator. She put a lot of hard work into it, and thank everyone that contributes on the committee.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else on 6-5? Nope. Anybody, anything else on consent, council? Seeing none, Madam Clerk.
And I have a motion by councillors Dufour and Gardy, resolved that all the items listed under date November 29, 2021, agenda item 6, consent agenda, save and accept agenda item 6.3 be approved as recommended.
All in favor?
So agenda item 6.3 is the 2022 user fee bylaw. Did you want me to read the motion put forth by Councillor Shoemaker and Scott now or at the end of your discussion?
No, why don't you, the council has the report and they have the motion with the report. So why don't you read the motion that Councillor Shoemaker and Scott put forward, and then we'll discuss and debate that. And if that passes, we'll move on to the main matter.
It's a motion by Councillors Shoemaker and Scott, whereas in December 2016, council passed a resolution seeking to charge users of the Sault Ste. Marie landfill who lived outside the Sault's municipal boundaries more in tipping fees than residents of Sault Ste. Marie are charged. And whereas the 2021 user fee bylaw Schedule I shows users from outside of Sault Ste. Marie paying the same tipping fee as users who are residents of Sault Ste. Marie. And whereas there are benefits to living within the city of Sault Ste. Marie that only residents of Sault Ste. Marie should have. Now therefore be it resolved that Schedule I of Bylaw 2021-224 be amended to increase the out-of-town tipping fee to $100 per ton from the current $77 per ton that Sault Ste. Marie residents pay.
Councillor Shoemaker, did you want to speak to the proposed amendment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was one of the people who put forward that 2016 resolution that's referenced herein to charge folks from outside of the city, essentially only Prince, because they're the only ones allowed to use our landfill outside of our jurisdiction, the additional fee. And I said at the time, and I still think that there has to be some benefit to being from the city of Sault Ste. Marie. And when it comes to paying for municipal services, there are a lot of municipal services like arenas, like our roads, that city of Sault Ste. Marie residents pay for exclusively, but that folks in the surrounding area benefit from. So where there is the opportunity to charge a user fee for services to those who don't live in the city of Sault Ste. Marie, I think that the user fee should be higher than it is for those who do live in the city of Sault Ste. Marie. And this is one of those instances This will not raise a significant amount of money. I think I spoke to Ms. Hamilton Beach earlier today, and it's somewhere in the range of $5,000 per year that this will raise for us. But I think it is symbolic of the types of actions we need to take to ensure that our residents have a benefit for living within the municipal boundaries. They're the ones who pay taxes, whose tax base supports all of the services that everyone in the whole area gets to benefit from. And like I said, where we have the opportunity to give a benefit to our residents, essentially by charging them less than those from outside of the boundaries, I think we need to take that opportunity. And this is one of those the ways we can do it. So that's the logic behind this motion.
Councillor Scott, do you want to add anything to that?
Councillor Shoemaker covered it all. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Nero.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A question to the mover, Councillor Shoemaker, I guess. I have no problem with supporting this motion. I understand the logic and I agree with it. My only question would be, and I believe I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask it. Why are we just looking at the per ton rate and not the gate fee?
I would be happy to amend the motion to include Councillor Nero.
I believe a number of years ago, and maybe Mr. Girardi or Ms. Hamilton Beach could address this. Something had come up that it could cause a lot of illegal dumping in the municipality if we raise that gate fee that way. Maybe I could pose the question to them, Mr. Mayor.
For you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Nero, yes, that is absolutely something that is a reaction often as gate fee is raised, and with it being obviously the proximity of Prince Township to the Sault, we certainly stand to see an increase on our roadways and in our bushes from that type of response.
Would there be the same impact, you believe, by raising the per ton a fee? Would there be the same concern?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Nero. As I believe we reported after the original resolution, our proximity to the border really poses us a huge challenge here, because there are cheaper options for waste disposal. And so raising the fee in this situation may in fact lose them as a customers, and so be it. It certainly saves landfill space. But I think we certainly have unique challenges. We have lost the majority of our commercial customers. I can certainly say that, which then leaves to the taxpayer through the course of our B&I plan. We then fund the full operation of the site. So not having those commercial customers and perhaps Prince, as we do right now, may affect that. I have not had communication with them. I do not know what their process would be there.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that answer. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor, Ms. Hamilton Beach, how much revenue right now do we generate from Prince on an annual basis?
To you, Mr. Mayor, I believe the amount was just over $13,000.
Okay. Okay. Oh, any other questions for staff on this issue, or questions for the mover and seconder on it? Okay, so the amendment, the motion to amend is up on your screen, so I'll call it now because I see no more comments or questions. All in favor? So leave your hand up so I can see you. So I've got Nero, Scott, Gardy, Bruni, Hilsinger, Shoemaker, Bezelal, Dufour, Hollingsworth, Christian, myself. So that looks unanimous. So you can just enter the vote on your was that correct, Madam Clerk? Was it unanimous?
I do have that recorded as unanimous.
Okay, so the motion's amended. Is there any further discussion on the 6.3 as a report? Councillor Nero.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one question, I guess, and it's something that I did see in the media over the last few days. Page 43 of the report, the historic sites part, where the one section went from $40 to $75, which of course is above the 2% increase. We got an explanation on that one?
So I see Mr. Lamming on the call here. He's willing to answer that question. So I'll go right to you, Mr. Lamming.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Nero. Yes, this is about cost recovery. We do have 2 programmers on at night that would stay through that, as well as security covers 3 meals, crafts. So essentially that's looking to cover the costs to deliver that program. So that's the reason for the increase, to cover that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that.
Okay. Councillor Shoemaker.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Through you, really to anyone, I suppose Michelle perhaps is the most logical person to respond to it. But when we increase a user fee, if it gives us a number that is not a multiplier of 5 or 5 cents, can we not round up to the nearest 5-cent interval so that we don't have, the penny fractions, which, as the media pointed out over the weekend, do not exist anymore?
To you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, yes, that will be done in the going forward.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else on 6.3? All in favor of the motion as amended? Passes.
That will bring us to agenda item 8 and agenda item 8.1, municipal revenue generating tools. I have a motion by councillors Hollingsworth and Christian. Whereas Canada's municipalities are at the forefront of delivering a growing array of vital services to citizens, ranging from affordable housing, transit, and childcare to managing more than $1 trillion of infrastructure. And whereas municipalities have a limited revenue generating options, which are largely property taxes, user fees, intergovernmental transfers, and development charges. And whereas the provincial government must begin to modernize the tax system to allow municipalities new revenue generating tools that will support the rising costs facing all municipalities in Ontario. And whereas the Association of Municipalities of Ontario estimates the annual province-wide municipal infrastructure deficit to be $6 billion. And whereas the City of Toronto Act 2006 granted Toronto broader municipal revenue tools than the other 443 municipalities in Ontario. And whereas AMO has long lobbied for its members the right to access the same revenue tools permitted by the City of Toronto Act. And whereas one of the revenue tools the City of Toronto charges is a municipal land transfer tax parallel with the province of Ontario on all property sales except for first-time homebuyers. And whereas this revenue tool would generate nearly $2.68 billion for the other Ontario municipalities, which would help municipalities' growing infrastructure deficit. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the City of Sault Ste. Marie endorses the Federation of Northern Ontario Municipalities resolution requesting AMO to lobby the Premier of Ontario to grant Ontario municipalities the same municipal revenue tools as the City of Toronto. Further, be it resolved that this resolution be shared with the Provincial Minister of Finance, NDP leader Andrea Horwath, leader of the Provincial Opposition, Stephen Del Duca, leader of the Provincial Liberal Party, the leader of the Provincial Green Party, MPP Ross Romano, Ontario's Big City Mayors, the Rural Ontario Municipal Association, Ontario Small Urban Municipalities, the Northwestern Ontario Municipal Association, and the Algoma District Municipal Association.
Okay, Councillor Hollingsworth, I'm going to start with you. It's your motion, so have at it.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me. I think as a council, we have been frustrated for the last number of years that municipalities are not equal with Toronto. And this is just one tool to hopefully start with trying to create an even playground for one piece. Two, we also have noticed, it's not new, that there's more downloading happening with throughout Ontario to the municipalities. We have seen it in social services. We have seen it in infrastructure costs and so forth. It is time that all municipalities work together, have one voice, and strongly lobby the provincial government that we all need to have other tools. Now, if we are fortunate with this lobbying, doesn't mean we have to use any of these new tools, but at least it's something that we could have in the future. Our budgets are becoming tighter. Our demands on municipalities are becoming broader, and we want to make sure that our community, our residents are properly being served. But it's become more difficult when our budget becomes more and more tighter. So again, this is just one way to get the ball rolling to make our mark. And if I may say, back in March, Premier Doug Ford did talk about downloading more. It's enough, and we have to start to push back. That's pretty much it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth. Council, do you have any questions, comments for Councillor Hollingsworth on the motion? Seeing none, I want to say, Councillor Hollingsworth, thank you for the really good work you do at FONOM. I appreciate your dedication there. You had a FONOM meeting in Sault Ste. Marie a few months back, and I was happy to attend and spend some time with you in the group. And I think you're as a group doing really good work for Northern Ontario. I can say that in principle, I agree with everything you're saying. I think municipalities are in a precarious position financially, and we're expected annually to provide more and more services. And we don't have the revenue generation tools that City of Toronto does, obviously. And it's getting more difficult to manage what we have to manage within our levy. You saw tonight a great example of that with the DSAB's presentation and how much of that funding for those social challenges fall into our levy. My concern with this motion personally is I don't want to give anybody the impression that I want to be part of levying a land transfer tax here in the city of Sault Ste. Marie for the city of Sault Ste. Marie. I have seen that tax levied a number of times. Councillor Shoemaker could probably attest in our private lives as lawyers. Sometimes we do real estate transactions in Toronto for clients, and you see the provincial land transfer tax, which you can imagine is sizable on a piece of property in Toronto. And then you see the Toronto land transfer tax, which we submit to the City of Toronto. And it always bugs me when people compare our taxes to the City of Toronto's taxes, because they don't factor in those extra revenue generating tools that you mentioned. And they don't factor in that when you buy your house in the City of Toronto, you're paying the City of Toronto $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 in land transfer tax. And you know, it could be certainly an impediment to home ownership for people who are trying to get into the home ownership model. And every time I'm part of that and I see that tax levied by the City of Toronto, I think to myself that I wouldn't support the City of Sault Ste. Marie levying that tax. I do believe that we need additional income generating tools. I do believe that there are different ways that the province can generate income that it can use to support the municipalities. And I do believe that the province should be uploading some costs that we bear on its behalf, which would make things easier on our levy. But actually having the land transfer tax as a tool in our toolbox is not something that I personally would support. So I wanted to make that clear, because I do want to recognize your very good work at FONOM and the important work that FONOM's doing. So council, so we have the resolution. Are there any other comments or questions on the resolution? So all in favor of the resolution? So we have Councillor Nero, Councillor Hilsinger, Councillor Shoemaker, Councillor Bruni, Councillor Hollingsworth, Councillor Christian, and Councillor Scott opposed to the resolution. So Councillor Lisa Vezuela, Councillor Dufour, and I, Councillor Gardy. I didn't see which way you voted. What does that mean?
I voted in favor, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. So the resolution passes. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, just to confirm, I have everyone in the affirmative with the exception of Councillor Dufour and yourself.
And Councillor Vezin-Wallin.
I keep getting kicked out of eScribe. So just if there's some weird things coming from me, Madam Clerk, it keeps kicking me out and then I have to log back in. So
I'll double check. with you.
Councillor Vezin-Wallin, you were opposed to that motion?
I was opposed, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So it is 8-3.
Okay, very good. That brings us to 8.2, Madam Clerk.
That is correct. 8.2 is a motion by Councillors Christian and Hollingsworth, whereas Sault Ste. Marie has approximately 1,200 road sections within city boundaries that must be maintained. And whereas the city's capital transportation budget is approximately $4.5 million per year, and whereas this amount has not increased over the last 2 decades, and whereas the overall condition of city roads continues to deteriorate as a result of an underfunded capital budget, and whereas city staff is currently conducting a provincially mandated asset management update of city roads maintenance requirements, and whereas council should investigate and compare capital road expenditures in other northern communities so that it has a benchmark of current practices and expenditures throughout the north. Now, therefore, be it resolved that council asks staff to prepare a report that compares capital reconstruction and resurfacing expenditures with other northern communities. Further, that the report attempt to include metrics related to length of roads, total lane kilometers, surface type, relative lengths of arterials, collectors, and local roads to help frame the results and add the necessary context for comparison, and that the report be presented to council by June 2022.
Okay, Councillor Nero, did you want to speak to that?
No, but I'd like to.
Oh, I apologize, Councillor Christian.
No problem. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Capital road reconstruction is a basic service that everybody expects. And really, when you look at the budget tool this year, the feedback is clear again that people are expecting more from us in terms of capital road construction. We obviously have a very serious issue in Sault Ste. Marie, and I think the mayor articulated it quite well on our support for mental health and the addiction crisis, and our focus will be there. But we can't lose sight of the fact that we have a very important budget item that needs to be, I think, seriously reviewed. Other municipalities in Northern Ontario struggle with the same challenges we do. Winter road conditions and winter conditions rather play havoc on our roads. So all the more reason we really need to have a look at this. We generate revenue for capital roads through the federal gas tax. We have the urban only levy, but 4.5 million is what comes out of the levy for capital road reconstruction. And as the report says, it hasn't increased. So, our council and future councils are going to have to look at this. We're running in a deficit here. We haven't improved it. Councillor Hollingsworth and I have talked about it several times. So the idea here is we've got a provincially mandated report coming to council in the summer. I thought it would make sense that we reach out to our other northern community partners to see what they're doing, because I think going forward, we're going to have more meaningful conversations about this. And I think all of this information collected by spring and summer will help frame any conversations we have about this issue in the future. Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Mayor.
you, Councillor Christian. Do we have any other comments, questions on this motion? Councillor Hollingsworth, go ahead.
Yeah. I think it's fair to say Councillor Christian and I, and many of us around this table, have a passion for roads. Roads are just not resurfacing. It's not what we see visibly. It's the underneath. It's the infrastructure that falls beneath the road that is also deteriorating. And when we sat down with the chief engineer, Don Elliott, actually a week and a bit ago, it was just absolutely shocking when he went through the entire list of roads that need attention. And again, as Councillor Christian was saying, we have not technically increased our budget on roads for decades. We really haven't, and you'll see these numbers more and more in the future. Having said that, $500,000 increase, which we've done in the past, barely covers a half a kilometer road. And again, it's the infrastructure underneath the road that is also very much of a concern. It's not just resurfacing. Having said that, it's not the main arteries, it's a lot of our side streets in all wards that are suffering. And this is a piece that both Councillor Christian and I know many of us around this table want to see repairs and focus on. We can't let this continue on. Just like we talked about public works with the fleet, if we let the fleet go, it's going to basically be a disaster. If we let this go any longer, it's going to be a disaster and more costly in the future to fix. Thank you.
Thank you, council. Anybody else? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion is carried.
Do I have a unanimous vote?
I think you did.
Okay, there's just a few that haven't been able to. Okay. So that will take us to bylaws. We're going to accept bylaw 2021-224 as it will go back to have the amendment that was passed earlier, and then it will be on the December 13 bylaw section. So I do have
Mayor?
221, 225.
1 second. So we're going to go to Councilor Nero. Councilor Nero.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could we also pull the bylaw 11.1.3, the downtown transit terminal, vote on it separately?
Yeah, I suppose we could, for sure.
Thank you.
okay, then I will let us not do the consent bylaw then. As there's only 3 bylaws, I might as well just read them separately.
Yeah, let's do that.
So bylaw 2021-220, the community pass pilot, that is a motion by councillors Vezo, Allen and Scott. Resolved that bylaw 2021-220 being a bylaw to authorize the execution of the amending agreement between the city and My Community Health Incorporated for the Community Pass app be passed in open council this 29th day of November 2021.
All in favor? Bylaws carried.
And 2021-224 will appear at next regular meeting. And bylaw 2021-225, I have a motion by councillors Vezo, Allen and Scott. Resolved that bylaw 2021-225 being a bylaw to authorize the execution of the agreement between the city and IDEA Integrated Design, Engineering and Architecture for the relocation of the downtown transit terminal construction and design located at 111 Huron Street be passed in open council this 29th day of November 2021.
All in favor? Bylaws carried. Opposed? Just for the record. Bylaws carried.
Councillor Vezo, Allen, how are you voting? Okay.
You voted in favor.
And Councillor Nero?
Opposed.
Opposed?
Yes.
So it carries 7-4. In favor are Gardy, Hilsinger, Dufour, Vezo, Allen, Christian, Hollingsworth, and Mayor Provenzano. And against are Bruni, Scott, Shoemaker, and Nero.
That's correct.
That will bring us to agenda item 14, a motion by councillors Vezo, Allen and Scott that this council now adjourn.
All in favor? Motion carried.
So, Mr. Mayor, that brings us to our budget agenda.
And we can get right into that, Madam Clerk?
Yes, we can. I'm just going to bring that meeting up.
Okay, it's up on my computer. Give council a chance to switch their agendas. We're now going to be in the budget meeting. can go to that agenda. Appreciate it. So whenever you're ready, Madam Clerk.
Okay. Under agenda item 1, I have a motion by Councillors Vezzo, Allen, and Gardy resolved that the agenda for November 29, 2021 budget meeting as presented be approved.
All in favor? Motion carried.
I have received no declarations of pecuniary interest.
Any to declare, Council? Seeing none.
And under agenda item 3, CAO 2022 budget report, a motion by Councillors Dufour and Scott resolved that the report of the CAO dated November 29, 2021 concerning 2022 budget be received as information.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Before you get going, I just want to contextualize this for the viewers at home. So the budget's being tabled tonight. City councilors have had this document for about a week's time. You'll see some presentations tonight. City Council will receive those presentations. City Council will have an opportunity to ask questions about those presentations, but we will not be deliberating our budget tonight. We will have another week before deliberations. During that week, councilors, obviously, each of you can reach out to city staff as you see fit to ask for any further questions. If you have questions about any outside agencies, locals, or levy boards, we can get answers for those to you also. And then we will reconvene a week today, next Monday, to receive additional presentations and then to actually deliberate over our budget. So with that context provided, Mr. CAO, if you can proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, members of council, the main budget presentation you will get today is from the CFO and treasurer and other finance staff concerning the preliminary budget. There will be 2 additional outside agency presentations from the public library and the Sault Ste. Marie Museum. Both of those agencies are asking for funding over and above what we provide for in the preliminary budget. So they will do their presentations for that. You'll be free to ask them questions, but you will deliberate on it next week at the budget meeting. I'd like to just note a correction on my report on the 2021 gas tax top-up funding that's available for council's consideration. It's actually 2.8 million, not 2.6 as listed in the report. As noted, this report is for your information. The CFO will go over the levy implications for both the corporate increase and the levy board increase. And as noted in the report, there is a path should council choose to adopt it at next week's budget meeting of utilizing the tax stabilization reserve to address COVID impacts for 2022, as we are not out of the pandemic yet. And that would bring the city share of the levy increase down to 1.11%. With that being said, if there's any questions on my report, you can ask them now. If not, you'll vote on that resolution and we'll proceed to the preliminary budget presentation.
Okay, so council, any questions of the CEO on his report? Seeing none, the vote, council, is coming onto your eScribe screen, I believe. Is that mine isn't working quite right?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, I needed to do another roll call in order to allow people to vote.
Okay, so are you going to do that roll call, Madam Clerk?
It should be open now.
Okay, it's open. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, if you can cast your vote, thank you. Okay, once you have that tally back, Madam Clerk, we'll move on to the CFO.
That passed unanimously. And now agenda item 4, the preliminary budget. And there is a presentation.
Okay, thank you. I believe you're presenting this, Ms. Shaw.
Yes, I am. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Good evening, bonjour, Annie. Tonight, the 2022 preliminary and capital budgets are being tabled. The budget presented represents a status quo, which assumes that the level of service provided will essentially stay the same while providing for the cost of doing business. While many of the city facilities have reopened in 2021 and capacity limit restrictions reduced or eliminated, it is still estimated that there will be a COVID-19 financial impact in the 2022 budget. Next slide, please. The agenda for the presentation includes details on financial indicators and forecasted economic conditions, a summary of the operating and capital budgets, and a short discussion of financial challenges and the next steps for the budget. Next slide, please. The global pandemic has impacted all the local, provincial, and federal economic predictions. The 2021 provincial fall statement released on November 4th provides some insight into Ontario's economic outlook and hope for recovery. Ontario's employment growth for 2020 was negative 4.8%, but is projected to rise to 4.3% in 2021 and 3.3% in 2022. The real gross domestic product in 2020 declined by 5.1% and is projected to rise in 2021 by 4.3% and 4.5% in 2022. Both are positive indicators for economic recovery in 2022. There's still a lot of uncertainty as the economic outlook will be influenced by the evolution of the pandemic and how that will ultimately impact the city. The financial indicators for the city reflect mainly a positive position. Discretionary reserves as a percentage of own source revenue still remain as a caution, as it is slightly less than our comparators and has decreased year over year. Debt requirements are still low, and the current level provides the ability to fund debt internally when required. COVID challenges and the use of the tax stabilization reserve in 2021 could further reduce this ratio. Additional reserve allocations for ongoing capital maintenance and equipment requirements are recommended in the near future and included in the 2022 supplementary request for council's deliberation. Detailed descriptions of each indicator are included in the CFO's report in the published preliminary budget. Next slide, please. Okay, next, we're going to discuss the operating budget. Next slide. Total expenses less non-tax revenue, such as user fees and grants, is the amount that is required to be raised through property taxes. It also includes amounts added by levy and local boards whom the city collects taxes on their behalf but does not have control over their budgets. The preliminary budget includes the actual levy for the Sault Ste. Marie Conservation Authority, Algoma Public Health, and the Sault Ste. Marie District Services Administration Board, otherwise known as DSAB. Levies were not received prior to the publication of the preliminary budget and have been estimated at a 2% inflationary increase. On November 24th, APH approved their budget, which includes a 10% increase to municipal revenues. And on November 25th, DSAB approved a 3.11% increase in their budget. Both will be incorporated into the final deliberation slide as an adjustment. Next slide, please. Total expenses of $191.9 million is an increase of 4.4% year over year. Approximately 50% of the expense increase is from the levy and local boards. The Police Services Board accounts for 92% of the change for the levy and local boards, mainly due to union contract settlements for multiple years being incorporated. This graph reflects the expenditure trend since 2018 and where investments have been made. The increase in the community development and enterprise services is the future SSM program investment and the move of economic development and tourism to city departments. Public Works and Engineering is the most significant investment in services by the city and shows a 10.8% increase from 2018 to 2022, an average of 2.2% per year, and approximately the amount of inflation annually. Levy boards have increased 1.2% on average per year, and local boards and outstanding agencies 4.5% per year. Next slide.
Shelley, may I, just before you continue, I think it's because you're wearing a mask, which you're required to do, and I appreciate that, but you're very soft-spoken. It's very faint. I think it's hard for people to hear what you're saying. So if you could try and speak up a bit, it would be appreciated.
Can I have my mask off, Mr. Mayor? Can you hear me better now?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I moved my microphone, so I think that might have been the problem.
Okay, thank you.
The city services percentage of expenses by type for the 2022 budget is consistent with previous years. Salary and benefits continue to be 1/2 of the expenditures. Salary and benefits are based upon the approved complement level, Any increase requested to the complement requires council approval. Several requests are included in the supplementary items for council deliberation. Next slide, please. Other revenue increases 1.6 million over 2021, reflecting an estimated recovery revenue less the 1.9 million decrease from the 2021 final budget for the use of the tax stabilization reserve, which was used to address pandemic financial impacts. No amount has been included in the tax stabilization reserve for 2022 in the preliminary budget. Government grants are a significant source of non-tax revenue, the majority of which is from the Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund, which accounts for 86% of the total. The level of funding received for the OMPF has increased slightly over the last three fiscal years. For 2022, the provincial government maintained the overall structure and program funding envelope as was provided in 2021. Next page, please. The preliminary operating budget identifies a 4.72% municipal levy increase, which includes levy and local boards. The city share of the levy, including estimated impacts for COVID-related expenditures, is 1.87%. The preliminary estimate does not include any amounts for the supplementary request, which will be deliberated and considered by council on December 6th. The 2022 COVID estimated impact is based upon the province's plan to safely reopen Ontario and manage COVID-19 for the long term, which was released on October 22nd, 2021. Based upon this plan, which anticipates a slow incremental lift of all remaining public health and workplace safety measures by March 28th, 2022, the city's operating budget incorporates pandemic impacts to the end of the first quarter of 2022. As per the CAO's report accompanying the preliminary budget, with the significant increase in the local cases of late, it is recommended that the tax stabilization reserve be used for 2022 COVID impacts. It is hoped that additional funding will be provided in 2022, as was the case in 2021, by the upper levels of government to assist with the pandemic. Levy and local boards are estimated at a 2.85% increase. As already noted, APH and DSAB are estimated to be more, and the APH board has now approved their budget, which reflects a 10% increase to the municipal levy, and DSAB has approved a 3.11% increase. And as already stated, the preliminary budget will be adjusted for the actual levies and provided as the new starting point for deliberations. Next slide, please. Salaries and benefits accounting for half of the total city share of expenditures, a similar proportion of the cost of maintaining services is reflected for normal operations. Approved council resolutions have an impact of approximately 400,000 or 22% of the normal operations increase. The remaining 28% is attributable to ongoing costs and revenues for the cost of doing business, as well as some additional revenue. Several significant items include $300,000 increase for insurance, $48,000 for hydrant rental increase, and $200,000 for increases in fuel and utility costs. COVID-19 impacts for community centers has reduced from the previous year by almost $400,000. The transit and parking impacts are still similar to 2021. Revenue has been impacted due to, in part, to ongoing decreases in ridership. Next slide, please. Included in the preliminary budget is a list of supplementary items for council's review and deliberation on December 6th. Supplementary items are a request to increase the budget for ongoing annual capital requirements, service level changes, or outside agency requests. Additional capital funding is required to maintain the assets needed to provide the approved level of service. Most of the requests included for 2022 were also requested in last year. Ongoing funding has not been approved, but some items were addressed in year through other means, such as utilizing reserve or postponing other capital projects. For the Parks Master Plan, a request of $150,000 relates to the plan approved by Council in 2019. Upgrades to the parks identified in the plan did not have a funding source. Implementation of the plan cannot proceed without an ongoing source of funding. In 2021, the city did receive a donation from a community organization, Kiwanis Club of Lakeshore, to support park revitalization at the Rosedale Park Playground. Community donations assist the city reach the goals of the Park Master Plan, but additional funding is still required if the plan is to be fully implemented as approved. Transit requires additional funding to continue to leverage the 73% grant through the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, also known as Icip. The annual capital requirement averages about $1.1 million for the city's share. Since 2018, the city share was provided by utilizing most, if not all, of the annual capital from current allocation. To balance the remainder, carryover capital roads budget surplus was utilized for other reserves. Without a dedicated funding stream, other capital requirements are not being addressed. This puts other service levels at risk if asset renewal and or capital maintenance does not occur. For 2022 and on, $450,000 of expired long-term debt servicing was available in the levy and has now been transferred to increase the annual transit capital allocation. The remaining 2022 funding requirement of $550,000 is covered within the recommended capital budget, and it does continue to utilize the capital from current allocation. The Public Works Fleet Study was presented to Council in October, which indicated a significant replacement backlog and further phases to provide a replacement plan and streamline work processes. The resolution also included a $250,000 increase to the current capital allocation. Engineering is requesting $500,000 for capital works and miscellaneous construction to help address the deficit in road and related linear infrastructure. The province has announced in their fall economic statement that the Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund will be doubled in the next several years. In 2021, the city's allocation was $2,015,467. So potentially an increase of $2 million will be provided annually, which is significantly more than the capital request. Note that the 2022 capital budget for capital works and miscellaneous construction is at the $2.0 million OSIF allocation only, pending confirmation of the actual new contribution for 2022. Once the increased funding is confirmed, staff will report back to council with additional capital road project recommendations. Next slide, please. Some options for fire services capital replacement are illustrated in the graph. There is a shortfall for ongoing fire equipment and fleet requirements. Full funding would require an additional $1.1 million for years 2022 through to 2025. Level funding of an additional $700,000 would still incur short-term deficits that would still have to be addressed until 2027. Funding for a potential catch-up will be assessed in conjunction with the Public Works fleet replacement options that are going to be explored in 2022. Although capital funding has been addressed within the 2022 capital budget, for most of the capital supplementary requests through utilizing reserves or other funding, this is not a long-term solution. As noted in the financial indicators, our reserve level is low as a percentage of own source revenue and increases the risk of not having the flexibility to address operational requirements such as this. Next slide, please. Also included in the supplementary requests are various resolutions of council for increased or new service levels. Several complement changes are also requested, and each department will provide further details as part of their presentations during budget deliberations. The museum and library have also requested additional funding for council's consideration, and they will be presenting tonight. Next slide, please. I'll now turn the presentation over to the Manager of Finance, Jake Bruises, to provide a summary of the capital budget.
Thank you. Attached to your agenda package, you will find schedules detailing the 2022 preliminary capital budget. The presentation will highlight some of the major capital items proposed for 2022. Next slide. The 2022 capital budget is seeking approval of a total of $38.6 million worth of investment. Nearly 2/3 of this is for roads, storm, and sanitary sewers. Major sanitary projects over the next 2 to 3 years include the addition of a biosolids management facility and significant pump station upgrades. The West End treatment plant project that is currently underway was approved in prior capital budgets. Approximately $4.7 million is allocated to transit fleet and equipment, of which up to 73% is to be funded through the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, otherwise known as ICIP. Building capital maintenance projects total $3.9 million for 2022. There will be significant investments required to the city's buildings in the years to come, and new long-term debt may be required. The city also engaged a fleet consultant to conduct a review of the PWT fleet requirements in 2021. Current and future years requirements in accordance with the report have been included with the 2022 supplementary items. Fire, fleet, and equipment capital expenditures total $810,000. As noted previously, significant expenditures continue to be required for fleet and equipment, and the current allocation to the fire equipment reserve is insufficient to cover these upcoming costs. The landfill B&I plan was approved by council in 2019. An allowance for capital expenditures has been incorporated into the plan and the fee levy structure. Increases in the levy required each year over a 15-year period, with average annual levy increases from 2020 to 2035 of 7.45%. This plan was updated in 2021 and will continue to be on an as-needed basis. Lastly, council previously committed the $500,000 allocated towards growth projects to the Downtown Plaza project. Next slide. Over 50% of the road construction program is funded through grants, with the largest grants being federal gas tax, OSIF, and Connecting Link. These grants are leveraged through city capital funds. Approximately $3.5 million in grant funding is also anticipated for the transit projects. The $6.7 million in proposed sanitary sewer projects is 100% funded from sanitary. Reserve and reserve fund monies are allocated to certain projects in accordance with availability and the city's reserve and reserve fund policy. Over $9 million of reserve monies are being used this year to fund capital projects. $3 million is being used of the landfill reserve, $1.2 million of the cemetery reserve fund, and over $2 million from the asset management reserve. Next slide. This slide summarizes the results of the staff capital prioritization process. The transit ICIP projects, IT upgrades, fire fleet and equipment, and new mausoleum highlight some of the recommended projects. In your agenda package, you'll find a schedule that details each of the capital projects submitted for 2022. During budget deliberations, council may choose to shift funding from one capital project to another. It should be noted, however, that in order to fully fund the transit and fire fleet and equipment projects, expired debt was used. And as mentioned previously, the fire equipment reserve is fully depleted. As the CFO mentioned, supplemental requests are included in the 2022 operating budget to address these capital funding issues going forward. Next slide. As mentioned previously, $500,000 is allocated towards the Downtown Plaza project. In the September 27th report to council was updated on total cost of the project. The total project cost is estimated at approximately $8.5 million, with the city share being nearly $7 million. Next slide. Next slide is a summary of the proposed 2022 road construction program. The Trunk Black Road Connecting Link project is contingent upon receiving the grant funding. The South Market Stormwater project is the most significant project for 2022. Public Works and Engineering continues to address resurfacing to the extent that funding is available. A supplemental request is also included in the 2022 operating budget to address shortfalls in the capital works / miscellaneous construction budgets. Next slide, please. This slide summarizes the proposed 2022 transit ICIP projects. With the continued ICIP funding, the city will be able to modernize the flight in due time, which in turn should help to reduce repair and maintenance operating costs for the department. Of note for 2022 are electric buses and a charging station. The total city share of ICIP projects for 2022 is $1.24 million. Once again, the 2022 operating budget includes a supplemental request to cover the city's share of ICIP funding on the go forward. And on to the last slide, please. The final slide is just a summary of the 2023 to 2026 capital forecast. As the CFO mentioned earlier, the city will likely require new long-term debt in the near future. The amounts in this chart mainly address cash flow due to significant sanitary and landfill projects over the next 4 years and is not expected to have an impact on future levies. Other new debt is anticipated in the near future with potential substantial construction projects on the horizon, including significant repairs to the community centers and a new fire station. These are not included in the forecast as they have not yet been approved by council. This forecast continues to show unfunded amounts over the next 4 years as the city's available capital budget funding is not sufficient to cover all the required projects. This is the end of the 2022 preliminary capital budget presentation, and I'll pass it back to the CFO for the next slide.
Sorry for the delay. We're just waiting for a mic to turn on. On to the challenges. So the challenges that could affect the city's ability to maintain the current level of service are consistent with previous years. Assessment growth continues to be very low, and as the cost to provide services continues to increase, it'll put an additional burden on the assessment base. Many assets are in fair to poor condition, and the infrastructure deficit in funding asset management requirements means that there is a risk that assets could deteriorate or fail, resulting in service level reductions. Additional resources are needed to address this. The city has been provided some significant resources recently that will assist. When deliberations occur next week, there will be a couple pools of new funding provided through the provincial and federal government that council may direct to the 2022 capital projects. In 2021, the federal gas tax was topped up by $4.5 million. After the allocation to the Downtown Plaza project approved by council, $2.8 million remains to be allocated to other capital projects. The province just announced last week a new Northern Ontario Resource Development Support Fund, which will complement existing funding streams for building infrastructure. The city's allocation for 2022 is $400,000. Also, as noted earlier, the OSIF funding dedicated to roads and linear infrastructure is to double in funding and is estimated to add $2 million to address the capital roads requirement. These additional upper levels of government support will greatly assist in addressing some short-term requirements. None of the funding streams are ongoing beyond a couple of years, so there is still a strong or still longer-term investment that will be required. With provincial funding levels not guaranteed in the future, whether capital funding or operational through OMPF, there is a risk of additional burden being placed upon the municipal tax levy, or alternatively, service level adjustments. Next slide, please. The tabling of the preliminary budget tonight, the deliberation process will begin on December 6th. At this time, the executive management team will present summary budgets for their areas. Any adjustments between now and the deliberation date will be captured and provided on the final budget levy or final budget level, on the final budget levy as a starting point. As the final budget levy is approved, tax rates will be set typically in March or April of 2022. That is the end of the budget presentation. Mr. Mayor, I turn the meeting back to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate that, both you and Jake, for your presentations. Council, before we move on, I thought what we would do is once we receive the presentations, we would ask questions of that presentation, and then we would move on to the next presentation. So you received that now. I have Councillor Christian on the list here. I see Councillor Shoemaker's hand. Any other, before I go to Councillor Christian, anybody else have questions or comments on the presentation they've received so far from Finance? I have Christian and Shoemaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you to CFO Shell and all of administration and staff for the preliminary budget. I've been on council now for 11 years, and the whole process has evolved. It's much better. It's a lot cleaner and much easier to understand. With that said, I just have a couple of questions of clarification, really. Because most of it was pretty straightforward at this point. My question to CFO Shell,
Shelley, I'm looking at slide 3 of 23. I'm looking at that financial indicators chart. And I think I appreciate the importance and the significance of the information, but I'm struggling with a couple of definitions that will help me better understand it. The first one, what do we mean by financial position per capita? It's a good number, but I need to understand exactly what that means.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, if you'll give me a minute, I need to open up my report. I don't have
Sure.
the definitions memorized off the top of my head.
Okay.
And just bear with me for 1 minute. Do you have another question while I find?
Yeah, and it would be the definitions for the terms underneath: discretionary reserves and own source revenue.
Sorry, I just have my report is moved. So
Yeah, Councillor Christian's referring to page 3 of your presentation.
Mhm.
I think his questions with respect to discretionary reserve is pretty straightforward. And that's total reserve.
okay, so the first one is financial position per capita.
Yeah.
So this is a measure that indicates the affordability of future municipal spending, and it's represented by the net financial assets. So this is your assets less liabilities per
Okay.
capita. So it's taking
Okay.
based on the population, which is around 75,000 that was used. These
Very
are actually from the BMA report.
Yeah.
The study that we get each year, and that is on our website if anybody has any
Sure.
interest in reviewing that.
Yeah.
What was the other one?
Well, that explains it. And that gives me some real context to that. The other one is right underneath it. Discretionary reserves. What do we mean by that? And what do we mean by own source revenue?
Own source revenue is non-tax revenue, to put it in basic terms.
Okay.
So this would be your user fees,
Okay.
that type of revenue, investment income.
Sure. And discretionary reserves, those are reserves just that we have for potential discretionary spending?
Yes, so some reserves are restricted, and usually those are your reserve funds. Such things as your gas tax revenues that aren't spent in year are restricted, and we can't use them for our own use.
Great, that's very, very helpful. Thank you. Just bear with me. I'm trying to walk my way through this as well. I'm on slide 12 of 23. That would be the fire services capital replacement funding. I appreciate that it's depleted. To be clear, we will, as part of the budgeting process this year, decide on the rate of replenishment. Is that the purpose of this slide, determining this year how we want to begin to replenish that fund?
To you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, the slide was to illustrate different options and to show that it is with the reserve being depleted and the requirements going forward, that there's not enough funding in it, and trying to show a few different options and what that would mean to council. So as I indicated, the requirements for fire for capital for 2022 are funded within the recommended capital budget. So everything is fine there, but we do have a situation where we're going to have to look at approximately $5 million worth of fire equipment that is going to have to be funded between 2023 and 2025, I think it was.
So thank you. And so getting back to my question though, so that's a decision that we will be making this year, determining what that road back will look like.
That will be done in 2022 because we have to look at some
Okay.
potential catch up and how it could be funded. We are funded for the 2022
Right.
budget year.
Okay, thank you. And final question. I'm on
This might be a question for Jacob. Slide 21 of 23. I was just looking at the capital forecasts, and I noticed two line items, and again, it's a definition or clarification thing for me. We have a line item as reserves and a line item for reserve funds, and I want to understand the difference between the two.
To you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, I believe Shelley just touched on that. Reserve funds are basically, they're restricted for a specific purpose.
Oh, okay.
Whereas
All right.
reserves they could be designated by council.
Okay, you're right. I did. Thank you very much. I apologize for that. Thank you.
Councillor Shoemaker.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Bruises. On slide 18, the capital prioritization projects, there's requests here for money for new mausoleum, which, if I understand correctly, the mausoleum that was just built is completely sold out. So there's no more room unfortunately, if people die between now and when a new one's built, to have mausoleum space. So I'm interested in supporting this. What I wonder really is the construction of a new mausoleum not just essentially a cash flow issue? We recover the full expense of it when the new crypts are sold. So to put it in the budget, I mean, can we not finance it kind of on a short-term basis in order to pay ourselves back, rather than having to include it like this in a budget request?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker. So this is 100% funded from the Cemetery Reserve Fund. So there is a dedicated source of funding for this. So as you mentioned, yes, it is basically a cash flow issue. But I mean, this does not come out of the other typical capital pots. It's just out of the Cemetery Reserve Fund, which is designated for this purpose.
It's not a levy increase.
Right. So what are we being asked to do? Just approve that the money come out of the Cemetery Reserve Fund?
Yeah, correct. Like any spending out of a reserve or reserve fund, it needs to be approved by council, no matter the dollar amount. And basically just going ahead with this project, because you go ahead with this right now, that'll use up basically everything that is in the reserve fund right now.
Right, right. But then, I mean, presumably.
But like you said, it'll be replenished with the sales.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Is that all, Councillor Shoemaker?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Council, before we move on, Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, I just have comments. I just want to also reiterate that to the finance staff, the process is improving each year, and I just want to echo Councillor Christian's comments. But also in the future, would you consider, Shelley, if you would put a line item in for donations? It seems like over the years, we as a city are receiving more donations from different community partners. And I think having a line highlighting donations would be something that I hope that you would consider, showing that the whole community is interested in helping. And also, I just want to say your projection chart with the fire services was very helpful, and maybe other projection charts can be done for other areas, so we know how critical certain aspects are. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth. Anybody else? Councillor Dufour, go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, maybe this is a bit of a process question, but I have a couple questions about the Public Works departmental budget. Is now the time to ask those, or is Public Works doing a separate presentation on their department?
No, you'll have separate departmental budgets when we go into deliberations next week. So you're not giving that this week, but you can ask a question about the information that you received.
Okay. I was just wondering, I noticed in the line-by-line budget for Public Works that there was approximately a $355,000 increase in the repair budget. And I was just asking if that was in addition to the supplemental request for the fleet plan. So I didn't know if that went through you to the CEO or to Ms. Hamilton Beach.
The CEO will take that question.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Duford, that question is probably getting into next week's deliberations.
I can save it for then, that's fine.
Yeah, we've tabled the budget with you. I would suggest that your questions stay with the presentation you received. And then if you have deeper questions regarding the individual service area or departmental budgets, you will receive a presentation from each of the areas next week. And that will be the time to ask the specific questions on those areas.
Okay, thanks very much.
Okay, Council, anything else? Councilor Bruni.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one quick question to the CFO, Shao. You mentioned near the end of your presentation, you're expecting government funding by the end of this week or early next week, and we will be notified. Is that true?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Bruni, I'm not sure where you were speaking towards that.
I thought you mentioned additional funding will be arriving.
No,
No?
I said when deliberations occur next week, that you have some new pools of funding that will be available for council to consider. One being the remaining federal gas tax for 2.8 million and the new NORDS funding from the province of $400,000. And as well, the OSIP funding for roads for $2 million approximately. I think that's what you may have been referring to.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. Right.
Anything else, Council? Okay, Madam Clerk, it looks like we can move on to our next presentation.
Yes, under agenda item 6, the budget 2022 community engagement. Tessa Vecchio, the communications officer, has a presentation.
Thank you. I will just share my screen here. Oh, we got it here. Okay. So ahead of the 2022 municipal budget, the City of Sault Ste. Marie requested feedback from residents and business owners regarding municipal operations. So considering the current COVID situation, the city did ask residents and property owners to share their priorities and input virtually once again this year. As part of that engagement process, corporate communications created a video to provide information on the budget process and inform the community as to how the budget is calculated. This particular video can be viewed on the city's YouTube channel and outlines the value that we all receive for our tax dollars. So, for example, every time your street is plowed or your garbage or recyclables are picked up, you visit the park, catch a bus, or borrow a book from the library, your tax dollars are at work. So we wanted to remind taxpayers that the municipal budget decisions set the funding for programs and services that we all depend on to maintain a quality of life here in our community. That particular video itself received over 2,000 views, and it was shared on the city's web and social media sites. Other ways we used to gather feedback included a survey, an online survey. So in consultation with the Budget and Finance Committee, we created an electronic survey through SurveyMonkey. And paper copies of the survey were available at the Senior Center, Northern Community Center, the Accessibility Office down at the John Rhodes, the Northern Branch, and the James McIntyre Centennial Library, as well as copies could be received at the Civic Center. A link was also sent to the students' unions at Sault College and Algoma University. So a really broad cross-section of people were asked to complete the survey. The survey really brought the city's strategic plan to life, and it asked participants which action plans to move forward while maintaining the city's service levels. So questions pertaining to municipal infrastructure, asset management, service delivery, quality of life, and community development were asked. And based on a total of 392 respondents that participated in the online survey, as well, we received 11 copies of the survey submitted by mail. These were the 5 most important services. So number 1 came in at police service, second was roads and sidewalks, third, parks and outdoor areas, fourth was fire services, and 5 was economic opportunities and industrial development. If we take it a step further, we look at some of the services that were also the value for the money that people feel that they receive for their property taxes. So in general, people thought that the value that they received is fair, good, or very good. So at that top 3. When we look at some of the strategic priorities, so how important are each of the City of Sault Ste. Marie strategic priorities? So for example, maintaining existing infrastructure was important, and investing in new infrastructure was somewhat important. When we look at service delivery and eliminating barriers to businesses and streamlining processes, it was somewhat important for us to improve those delivery of services. And when we look at quality of life, such as a vibrant downtown area, arts and culture, environmental sustainability, it was important. And then when we look at community development and consultation and reconciliation with key stakeholders, again, this was very important for our community to continue with those endeavors. In addition, we saw some discussion on our social media channels. So there was numerous ways that we engaged with online audiences through budget-specific messages. So for example, the Budget 2022 social media content received over 22,000 impressions across Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So what this means, impressions are the number of times content was displayed and showed to residents through social media. And if we look at the actual reach, we notice that there's over 8,000 people that actually engaged with this content and participated as part of these discussions. So what we heard in terms of social media, importance of environmental concerns, investment in transit, downtown plaza, snow removal, and roads. So very consistent what we've seen throughout. Similar to last year, the mayor and CAO participated in virtual town halls. Village Media and Superior Media led these initiatives, so our media partners, and they provided 2 opportunities for readers to submit questions. So the virtual town halls aired on October 7th and October 15th, and they're available to continue to view on our partners' media sites. Town Hall number 1 included questions pertaining to the plaza, social issues, public works staffing, parks and recreation, and economic development. And those questions are included as Appendix F of the council report. And Town Hall number 2 included a discussion on housing, environmental concerns, downtown development in the plaza, and as well vacant properties and policing. And those questions are included as Appendix G. Interestingly, new this year, we ventured into some online polling. So Village IQ platform, which is a reliable method of capturing valuable reader opinions, their polls were consistent with what our survey and the survey conducted with Sioux Online were saying. So interestingly enough, we still see policing services are very important, followed by social, community, and senior services, as well as economy and job creation. And again, you could see that those are consistent with the Sioux Online polling as well. Another question we asked, which was different, was the recreational infrastructures that you think the City of Sault Ste. Marie should invest in. And a lot of people wanted to see the expansion of the hub trail, as well as upgrading play features in existing parks. In partnership with the Ontario Aboriginal Housing Services, the city also hosted an urban Indigenous budget consultation with Mayor Provenzano and CAO White and members of the Indigenous Community Advisory Board. And this was held on November 8th here at the Civic Center. And lastly, to help generate some interest, we advertised locally in Post Media and Superior Media and Village Media. As well, we boosted ads socially through Facebook and advertising on our city's website, and participated in various media interviews such as the one seen here on with Sue this week. So lots of ways that we tried to remind people to engage with us. Overall, we would say that the virtual consultation process was a success. There were hundreds of citizens engaging in the process and provided very thoughtful feedback. So thank you to the community and to those that participated in the process. We were overall very pleased with the participation from the community and the suggestions that will be used to help us set our collective goals and build a great city together. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Tessa, for your work on that. You and Jordan did a very good job. We appreciate it. Council, do we have any questions for Tessa? I think we've come a long way in the way that we're engaging the community and the efforts we're making to reach out. A number of years ago, we would have a couple availabilities to have town halls where a few people would attend, and we decided it wasn't really a meaningful engagement and we weren't getting a lot of action and activity. And we've come a long way in really trying to get out there and communicate with the community and give them a chance to have meaningful input. So I appreciate staff's effort in that regard. Councillor Veselal, and I saw your hand go up there, so I'll start with you.
Thanks so much, Tessa. Great job. I mean, 392 respondents to the online survey is amazing. My only question is, for the 11 that were received by mail, do you have any idea where they originated the survey from?
Yeah, through you, Councillor Veselal, or through you, Mr. Mayor, through Councillor Veselal, the surveys primarily that were received by mail were ones that were located at the off-site. So, for example, they were received from the Senior Center, from the library, from the John Rhodes. So any location where we had paper copies, that's where we received primarily the mail feedback from.
Did anyone contact you requesting you to send them a paper copy?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Veselal, no.
Okay, thanks so much, Tessa. Really appreciate all the info.
Anybody else with questions or comments? Councillor Hollingsworth, go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. To you, Tessa. I believe last year our survey responses were, I think, around the 200 mark, or maybe 170 or something. Is that correct? Or approximately?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, that is correct. We have seen a very good increase in our participation this year. And I don't have the number offhand, but you are correct. It is in the hundreds from last year to this year. Seeing over 300 responses is quite substantial.
True. And so it looks like it's trending up. You may not be able to answer the second question, but next year, hopefully we'll be back to normal. Do you anticipate that if we're back to normal and we have more face-to-face, will you continue to engage our local media? Will you still continue to engage this type of platform of gaining people's opinions? I think that there is a maybe opportunity to do both.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, we definitely see the value in the sort of a hybrid approach in terms of doing a bit of an in-person and a virtual consultation. We were hopeful that we would be able to do so this year, and we had anticipated that it would look a little bit different, but because of the COVID situation, we were forced to move primarily online. But absolutely in the future, we would love to see a hybrid approach of continuing with the online engagement, but also offering those in-person consultations.
Okay, and one last question. Were you able to dive into the data to figure out if some of the responses came from outside our community? We do have a number of Suites that still have their heart here, even though they don't actually live here. I know that they visit or they have maybe recently moved back. Was there a way to dive down into the data to find out if we had outside people replying?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth. That was one of the, that was a part of the feedback that we received from last year's survey. So included in this year's survey, we've actually added a question at the end that identified where people can post what ward they're from, or alternatively mention where they are responding from. So we did include that.
Okay. Great. Again, well done. And thank you to our media partner for working so closely with you. And again, excellent information. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else on council have questions or comments on that report? Seeing none, thank you. You've got a vote up on your e-scribe, so all in favor? Passed. Thank you.
I'm just waiting for Councillor Gardy and Councillor Nero. Are you affirmative?
We don't have either of them. Can you close the vote without their votes, Madam Clerk?
I can.
I'll just do that because neither of them appear to be present.
I think I voted. I did vote.
Oh, did you vote in favor, Councillor Nero?
I did.
Sorry, you must be on a different screen here. I apologize.
Okay.
Yeah, you are. Did you lose connection and come back on?
I did. I did.
Yeah, so I apologize. When that happens, Zoom automatically bumps you to the second screen, so I didn't see you there. I'm sorry.
Okay.
So he was, Councillor Nero was in favor.
Yes. And under agenda item 8.2 is the Public Library Board. There is a presentation, and Matthew McDonald, the CEO, and Roseanne Chan, the business administrator, are in attendance.
Welcome to council, Mr. McDonald, Ms. Chan. Thank you for your time tonight.
I believe Ms. Chan is still waiting to be let into the meeting.
No, I think she's, I see her on the screen here.
There she is.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to pass it over to our business administrator, Ms. Chan, and then if you have any questions, I'm here to answer those later.
Okay. Welcome to council, Ms. Chan. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So good evening, Mr. Mayor, Provenzano, and members of council. I would like to thank you very much for this opportunity tonight to present the Sault Ste. Marie Public Library budget for 2022. Next slide, please. Now in our budget, we're asking for about $122,000 increase in our municipal grant. This will cover both contractual and inflationary increases from the prior year. Now, our budget is still showing a deficit of $30,000, and this is for a service level change request, which I will cover shortly. Now, I'd like to note that a majority of our revenue is from the city of about 85%. As such, we are highly dependent on the city for operating funds in order to continue to provide the materials, programs, and services that the community appreciates and enjoys. Next slide, please. Now, in turn, City Finance recommend a 2% increase of about $56,000. This would only cover a few of our contractual increases, such as salaries and benefits, insurance, and a long-term building lease. It would not cover any of our inflationary increases, and it would leave us with a deficit of about $96,000. Next slide, please. Now, of this, we are asking for about $87,000 in a budget supplemental request. This would consist of $57,000 for operational expenditures. Now, this is in order to maintain our staffing levels at both locations, including the hiring of students and the ability to leverage other funding grants, such as the Young Canada Works program. Now, without our staffing, we would not be able to continue to provide the successful programs and services that we offer throughout the year, such as our 2021 Culture Days, where the city placed 6th among mid-sized cities for top participating communities Canada-wide. Now, more specifically, the $14,000 is the remainder of the contractual increase that we did not receive in our prior year's budget and still trying to absorb. Now, $15,000 would be to maintain our materials to meet the reading and information needs of our community. This includes our online and digital resources that the community can access from their homes or a mobile device. Now, in the last few years, we've seen an average increase of 5% in annual costs from our vendors, which is greater than the country's rate of inflation. And some of our digital resources are purchased from the United States, and yet our Canadian dollar continues to average 70 cents per US dollar. 28,000 would be for other inflationary costs not covered by the recommended 2%, such as utilities, office supplies, and postal services. And for the service level change request, we are asking $30,000 in order to contractually hire a part-time security guard to improve security and safety for the public and our staff. Next slide, please. Now, our security and safety needs are due to an increase in the number of incidents in the downtown area, but also as a recommendation from our Joint Health and Safety Committee for a number of reasons, such as the increase in severity of the instances, drug use and paraphernalia on library property, patrons are intoxicated or have mental health issues, or a long response time from police or on-call security. Now, for preventative actions, this year we've added more security cameras and exterior LED lights on the premises, and we've added more panic buttons for emergency notification. And in previous years, we've conducted an environmental scan with police services. Our budget supplemental request would fit into the city's corporate strategic plan in the focus areas of service delivery and quality of life. Now, of course, we are appreciative of any funding that the city will provide to us. Next slide, please. Now, we are part of the downtown hub and in the cultural corridor, but we are also a community hub, a place where families and people of all ages can come together to create good memories through our free programs and services. Now, this year, the library celebrated its 125th anniversary. As part of our anniversary celebrations, we eliminated most of our overdue fines. This is part of a Canada-wide initiative for public libraries to provide equitable access to all. Now, I am pleased to announce that in partnership with the City of Sault Ste. Marie and the Invasive Species Centers, we will be creating a biodiversity garden. The garden will educate on preventing invasive species and beautify the area which the community and visitors can enjoy along with the other amenities. And we continue to raise community awareness through our social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And this year we've also added TikTok. To date, we have received more than 410,000 hits. We also continue to see an increase in our active library card holders. To date, we've seen an increase of 6%, and we presently have more than 21,000 card holders. Compared to the 2016 census population, that makes more than 1 out of every 3.5 individuals in the city a card holder. Now, in 2022, we will be expanding our services. We will be adding to our digital resources Overdrive magazines, giving the public access to more than 3,000 magazines online. And as part of National Truth and Reconciliation, the library will be giving free membership to residents of Garden River and Batchewana First Nations member, and Métis Council. Next slide, please. Now, thank you for 125 years of support. Next slide.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Council, do we have Ms. Chan here and also Mr. McDonald. So if we have questions for them. So I see Councillor Dufour's hand up. We'll start with him. Go ahead, Councillor Dufour.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'm not sure if my question is for Mr. McDonald of City Finance. I'm just trying to understand the deficit that's occurring due to contractual increases that presumably were for contracts that were helped to be negotiated by the city. So, Mr. McDonald, am I to understand that that a deficit was created in a lack of funding last year that's now carrying forward to this year for contractual increases?
Yes, so the 2% that City Finance allotted for this year does cover our contractual agreements for the 2022 year, but in the previous year, we didn't have enough to meet our contractual agreements.
And how much was the deficit from the previous year for those contractual agreements?
I'll refer to Roseanne for that.
Councillor Dufour, the budget supplement request, the prior year's contractual increase of a net met was $14,000.
Okay, so we have a prior year deficit of $14,000 that wasn't included in last year's approved budget. And then going forward is I'm to understand then that this year's contractual increases of 2% are covered in the preliminary budget
Yes,
recommended by the city?
As Councilor Dufour, it will cover our salaries and benefits and insurance and long-term building lease for 2022 only.
Okay, and beyond that would be the request for security?
Yes, there's additional request $30,000 for security, and that's out of the 87,000. 57,000 would be for other expenses such as the 14 from last year, binding and US exchange for the current year 2022, and other inflationary increases.
Okay, so I guess my question just for city finance, I'm just trying to understand what's currently in the preliminary budget in front of us and what's a supplementary request. So is the $30,000 the only supplementary request and what's currently already in our budget, the $57,000 inflationary increase? Is that correct? I'm looking at slide 4 of 7 on the library's presentation.
You, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Dufour. You'll see on the city's supplementary list that there is a total of 87,129, which includes the 30,000 service level change that council would have to approve for the security, as well as the staffing levels from 2021 that were not approved by council, and as well the remaining items that Ms. Chan had mentioned regarding the collection, US exchange, and other inflationary increases.
So to understand correctly, then what's in the staff recommended preliminary budget does not include the money to catch up on contractual increases and for the other inflationary increases listed under the $57,000.
No, it does not. As per discussions from last year, we used to just add a set inflationary amount, but then there was discussion at council during last year's budget deliberations that we should at least include what is required for the contractual obligations. So we have included that for the 2022 increases, as well as items that were approved, such as the rental increase for the northern branch, which has a lease obligation, and insurance, which, as you know, has escalated for the city as well as the library and is beyond their control.
Okay, so we still have the matter of catching up from the deficit created last year, then at a minimum. Okay, I think I'm clear now. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, just so I'm clear, the 14,000 then is a recurring shortfall. Am I understanding that correctly? You're not looking for 14,000 just to make up for 14,000 you were short last year. That wasn't approved, but that amount's in the budget again this year. So you're looking for 14,000 on an ongoing basis. Is that correct?
That would be correct.
Okay, thank you. Any other counts? Any other questions, Council? Councilor Hollingsworth?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, to, I'm not sure which one to ask, but I just want to have a comment on your insurance. Do I see your insurance at about 16,000 approximately? I guess I'll ask Mr. McDonald or.
Well, I think Roseanne has the actual numbers, but I can tell you that our insurance has gone up significantly over the last several years, and we've been a bit surprised about what the bill comes to us as. So, Roseanne, do you have the exact number?
I believe the insurance went up to approximately 23,000. What happened was that we were not aware of the increase in our insurance in the previous year in time for the budget. And so we had continued to use an old budget number, and now we're catching up. And so that's why the massive increase is showing this year, and that we're actually able to reflect it this year. So.
Okay. Thank you. I thought I saw a big difference with your insurance, which in a way it's not surprising because insurance is going up for everyone, including the city. Thanks for that clarification.
Okay, Councillor Hilsinger.
Thank you. I'm just curious to know, can you tell me how many staff you have that are included in those salary and benefit numbers?
Full-time equivalency, I couldn't tell you right off, but there would be approximately 56 to 58. It can vary with the part-time staff. I mean, we can divide more hours up or a few hours up between the amount of people that we have. I believe we have about 28 full-time staff and the rest are part-time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from council? Okay, thank you. Matthew, thank you. Roseanne, thank you. We appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Agenda item 9.4 is the Sault Ste. Marie Museum, and William Hollingshead, the executive director, and Bob Lambert are in attendance.
Okay, so welcome to council. William, are you? I think are you Will on my screen here? There you go. That's who you are. And Mr. Lambert, we're looking for you now. Is he also with us?
He should be.
Yeah. Has he been admitted, Madison?
Evidently, he is not in the waiting room.
No, I don't think he is. So are you willing to proceed or ready to proceed, William, or do you want to wait and see if he comes on?
In the hopes of not holding everyone up, I am prepared to proceed so this doesn't take as long.
Okay, that sounds great. We are in your court then.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
All right, so good evening, elected councillors, Mr. Mayor and Madam Clerk. My name is William Hollingshead. I am the Executive Director and Chief Curator here at the Sault Ste. Marie Museum. Supposed to be with me was Mr. Robert Lambert, the current Lieutenant Colonel of the 49th Field Regiment, RCA Historical Society. So next slide, please. So today we are looking for a budget increase. We're going to go over a few of the things that we have accomplished in the past year. So under programming, outreach, and collections, we have seen a very large increase in weddings, events, venues, and meeting bookings. So using the actual space as a very large community hub. We have also launched a comprehensive artist in residence program. Our first inaugural artist was Isabelle Michaud, where we explored Frenchtown and the Francophone population of Sault Ste. Marie. We've also had Tracy May Chambers doing hashtag Hope and Healing Canada, which is a cross-Canada site-specific installation. Our second artist in residence will be Ray Fox through the support of the Ontario Arts Council. And this is to explore the Indigenous connection, heritage, and history of Sault Ste. Marie. And we also have an international professor of fine arts at Rollins College in Florida with an ongoing residency. All these artists are interacting with our archives and with our collections to create works of art based on local history. We have also received some Ontario Arts Council funding. So Artists in Communities and Schools, which is a large-scale textile installation piece, remapping and unweaving Sault Ste. Marie in the surrounding area. That's in partnership with the Algoma's Weavers Guild, Art Speaks, various Indigenous artists. We've also received an Artists and Presenters Fund grant, which is supporting our second official residency. So that would be Ray Fox, looking at the Indigenous heritage of Sault Ste. Marie. We have also created a national publication for the United Steelworkers Union of Canada on partnerships between museums, which incorporated a design guide, videos on how to do design, educational programming, and also a guide on how to partner museums with local unions. We've also created a social prescription pilot project with Algoma University Students Union and Art Speaks, where we're looking at using or incorporating the holistic treatment of individuals utilizing cultural and arts programming to enhance and improve mental health and well-being. At this point, mainly for students, but we are looking at exploring this program further. We've also received a large acquisition of community group and member donations. As you can see, Bond 2, Sault Ste. Marie Police Services, the Ontario Finnish Rest Home, as well as the Royal Canadian Legion, which we are holding for 2 years until the new building is complete. We've also gone through various programmings, outreach and workshops such as Jamestown's programming, seniors programming. We've offered virtual education kits to both school boards, free craft kits. We've done a local craft circle. We've also done in-house events, participated in the Culture Days events, which was number 6, as the library did mention. We had the Sioux Symphony perform an orchestra. We participated in Moonlight Magic, and then various kids programming throughout the year. Next slide, please. So under capital and operations modernization, we have participated in the new lighting retrofit program through a green incentive program. So we will be replacing all of our dated fluorescent fixtures throughout the entirety of the building. We will be putting in about $8,000 in capital expenses for this to happen. We have also new archival and artifact storage, so new storage shelvings, new cabinets. This has been about a 1.5-year reorganization project to which we have created 30 years minimum of future collecting and storage capacity. We're also improving the quality of storage and more able to meet the standards set out by the ministry. This project is not yet fully complete, but from the pictures on the screen, you can see some of the before on top and the after below as to how we have improved those spaces. We have also implemented new technologies, so new touch screens, new audio stations featuring oral histories, which will soon to be implemented. We're just pricing out some material for that. We've also been able to undergo the process of being able to digitize various forms of media, so U-Matic tapes, Betamax, DVS, DVD, VHS tapes, records, and then soon we'll be able to do 8mm and 16mm film footage. This is a service that we do offer to the public, as well as we have been working with the collection that was donated from CTV. Our website and social media have also gone through upgrades, so our website is now more accessible, includes more information and more public research abilities. We've launched an online gift shop. Our YouTube page has expanded to feature a lot of these digitized pieces of footage. We have a local history blog. We have created virtual tours of our rotating exhibits, and we have an upcoming oral history project, which will in audio versions of that on our website. We've also had education wing upgrades and seniors programming studio upgrades for our weavers, which you can also see in the top 2 spaces on the right. Those are the education wing. And also thanks to the city of Sault Ste. Marie, through capital upgrades, we have been able to see building improvements such as brickwork, HVACs, and new ladders to the roof. We have also been able to obtain boiler upgrades through a program with Henderson, which will give us new boiler ignition units through an initiative. And then very soon we are looking at having the windows changed with the city of Sault Ste. Marie. So none of that would have been possible. So I would like to extend thank you to the staff and everyone who has helped to work on that from the city's perspective. We've also been able to get the museum bell, which used to be placed on the roof, installed in front of the museum. And this was also thanks to Public Works and the city of Sault Ste. Marie. We're just waiting on some signage to go up, and then people can see that for sure. Next slide, please. So staffing. The Sault Ste. Marie Museum currently employs 3 full-time and 7 part-time staff. This staffing complement allows the museum to continue to enhance its offering and uphold its mandate as the community museum of Sault Ste. Marie. The successes of the past 2 years, we haven't seen a deficit, we haven't laid off any staffing. It really relies heavily on the skills and talents possessed by all of these staff. So we have various staff with very different degrees. We have master's degrees, bachelor degrees, we had a PhD degree, as well as experience over 17 years, 5 years, and 10 years working in museums, covering things like conservation, grant writing, artifact storage, historic site management, programming, et cetera, et cetera. So as we see minimum wage going up in January of 2022 to $15, we do need to look at some additional funding to support and employ our much needed staffing levels, which allow us to do all the before mentioned things such as the programming, the outreach, the capital upgrades and operations, and also ensure that our senior staffing is paid a competitive and livable wage compared to everyone else. So we do also in our part-time staff employ young and emerging professionals within the cultural sector on an ongoing basis. We do our best to seek grant and wage subsidy funding, but continued employment helps to grow and allow for the programming, capital outreach, artifact reorganization that was completed, as well as everything else. Next slide, please. Therefore, in conclusion, we are looking at an increase in funding of $13,909, which is about a 5% increase on our current allocation. And this will allow us to continue to employ both emerging, established professionals within the sector, and it will allow for the museum to continue to grow, modernize, become a leader within the Northern Ontario Museum sector, and really be your community museum to discover. So from the 13,909, due to our funding agreement, we are looking at adding 9,000 of that to staffing and then 4,909 to operations / building management, which would equal a total of 260,000 for next year. Our previous budget allocation was $246,091. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that presentation, Will. I appreciate it. We have Sandra Hollingsworth, Councillor Hollingsworth, who put her hand up very quickly there, so I'll start with her.
Thank you. Well done presentation, and thank you for all your hard work and your team for keeping history alive and fun in our community. First of all, can you comment on your donation level? How are your donations right now? And I know that you're usually very creative in having a donation campaign. Can you comment on your campaign as well, please?
Yes, absolutely. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth. We do receive annual donations. So mostly our donations do come from the boards of education. So we do get donations from both the Huron-Superior as well as the Algoma District School Board. With those donations, we do offer free programming to both school boards throughout the year, no matter the amount or request that they ask us for. So we have currently been providing virtual kits due to COVID and no actual in-house field trip visits, I guess. We also receive community donations. We were lucky this year to get a estate donation from someone who unfortunately passed. We do get a donation through a program that we are set up with as well. And then various community people will absolutely donate funding to the museum. We were lucky to receive a large amount from someone this year, as well as a couple other people as we've kind of moved forward.
Okay, so going along the donation line, in the future, is it possible you can give us a line item of your donations? Because I know that you work hard at increasing your donations, And do you have a donation campaign in mind to create awareness for 2022 yet? Have you started to think about that?
Normally, the way we approach community donations is through our membership renewals. So people mostly
Okay, good.
will donate as they renew memberships, though it does happen on the occasion where people will just occasionally donate or be willing to provide some funding for certain projects or things like that. So it absolutely is in place for our membership renewal currently. And then we had plans for some fundraising for donations, but obviously COVID put some of that on hold. We were looking at doing a Save the Future kind of thing, but that kind of fell apart. So,
Okay.
or sorry, Back to the Future, Save the Clock Tower. I mixed that up. My apologies.
Great. Two other questions. Since you redid your website, I apologize. I have been on your new website. Do you have a donation button on your website right now?
Currently, we don't, just for the purposes of administration and doing the tax receipting, though it is something that we are looking at for sure.
Okay. And final question, you just talked about quickly about the Save the Clock. I know in the past you were keen on preserving the glass and the arms of the clock. And I believe the clock doesn't really function only in the summer months when it's warm, because in the winter time, you can get ice gather and it could break that wonderful Tiffany glass. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. Yes. So we do only operate it in the spring and summer months where there is no snow buildup, because yes, there is no front cover glass on the hands. So during the winter months, the snow buildup will clog the hands and break them, or break the mechanism within. So we usually have it from May till November if we can.
And hence Save the Clock idea.
Yes, fix up some of the glass, add some protective, maybe some brickwork funding.
Okay, thank you. Well done.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Any other councillors with any questions or comments? Councillor Bezoal.
Thanks for the presentation, Will. And I know the Artist in Residence program has been really well received, and really congratulations on that. You've definitely created a different sense of belonging for the museum. And I think just to clarify, in terms of donations, you are not a registered charity, are you?
We, through you, sorry, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Vesno-Allen, we are actually a registered charity and non-for-profit, so we can do the tax receipts as part of donations received.
Okay, so one recommendation, because I did go on your website a few days ago, is you don't have your charitable registration number on your website, and that's a requirement. So I was trying to go in the About You and all of that kind of thing to determine if you're a registered charity. So it's important, like under your mailing address, to have your CRA registration number. Yeah, just a little aside. That's good to know. And just to donations and fundraising is down about 50% across the board. So I certainly understand the efforts. Have you been able to have any of the recovery grants, especially through the government for wage subsidy, if your revenues were down?
We haven't explored the wage subsidy, though we have explored reopening funding through the Museum Assistance Program. So last year we were successful in receiving about $40,000, which was a carryover into this year to cover a lot of that archival and storage reorganization, as well as some staffing. We have applied again this year for the same type of funding. It just hasn't been released yet due to the election changeover in staffing. So we're just waiting for that to come in.
Okay, thanks so much, Will. I just wanted to point that out when I was doing some research on your website.
Absolutely. My apologies, and thank you for pointing that out.
No problem.
Okay, council, anybody else have anything for Will? Councilor Dufour.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Hi, Will. I was just wondering if you had any information about your board or board meetings on your website for the public to view or learn more about members.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Dufour, we do have a list of our current board members available on the website under the contact us portion at the bottom. We do circulate our board meetings to all board members. We don't tend to publicly post them on various media sites just due to there's never really much reception for those. Though if there is a way that you would see fit for us to do so, I think that would be an absolute benefit for more people to participate.
Thanks, Will.
Okay, anybody else on council? Thank you, Will. Thank you for your time and thank you for your work at the museum. It's been noticeable, the activity there, so we appreciate that effort.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Madam Clerk, I think that brings us to the end of our presentations.
It does?
And which would, I think, bring us to the end of our agenda. Is that correct?
That's correct. The next I have is the adjournment motion.
Okay. Council, before we get to that, does anybody have any questions about the process that we followed to date and what we'll do next week? Seeing none, motion to adjourn. All in favor? Motion is carried. Thanks for everybody's time and attention tonight. We'll see you next Monday.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.